We all have destinies. I do believe that Stevie knew from a very, very early ages that this was what I was meant to do, and I have to at least try. When she and Lindsey Buckingham were dropped by Polydor Records after their first and only album didn't perform so well, and she thought, this is it. I guess I'm done. I think her parents said, well, give it 6 more months. Who knows what would have happened if Fleetwood Mac hadn't come calling. I like to think she would have figured something out.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. If you'd like to support the podcast, get episodes commercial-free, sign up for the Backstage Pass from Patreon, just $5 a month. The link in the show notes, or you can go to bookedonrock.com. Now our guest, Rachel Brodsky. She is the author of the upcoming book, Lessons in Lace, Everything I Know About Dreams, Heartbreak, and Magic I Learned from Stevie Nicks. Welcome to the podcast, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Who doesn't love Stevie Nicks? I guess that's my first question. She's the best.
I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't, although I have kind of a funny story just made me think about. I went to see Stevie at well, I'm based in LA, but I flew to New York to catch her show at Barclays Center in the fall of last year in 2025. And as people were pouring into the venue, some people just passing through Barclays, like this was like a young kid. And she was just like, who is Stevie Nicks? And I was like, okay, so someone doesn't know who they are. But she was like really young, like she had to have been either middle school or high school. And I was like, I won't hold it against you. So
Yeah.
I think like no one doesn't like Stevie, but maybe some people don't know her.
Well, one day she will find out. What first inspired you to write an entire book that's centered around the lessons and the philosophy of Stevie Nicks rather than a traditional biography?
I wish I could take credit for the idea itself, but that really wasn't me. I took an idea and I ran with it. So at the beginning of 2025, yeah, I'm trying. It's sort of a blur at this point. At the beginning of last year, it was like maybe the third day of the year, and I actually remember that I was feeling, I don't know, a little bit like New Year's Day kind of gloom, like just wondering what the year was going to hold, and like it's so quiet. If you're a freelance writer, if you work in like the freelance world at all, you're always positive that like your last assignment will be the last one, period. And it was like the afternoon, and I just opened up in my email, and I'd gotten a note sent through my website from an editor at my editor, Donna, at Harmony Random House. Or rather, Harmony is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And she was like, hey, we're familiar with your work. Our imprint is considering doing this sort of philosophical, she called it a prescriptive biography of Stevie Nicks. Is that something you might be interested in? And I was just like, yes, like I was like, could I can't respond to this fast enough because it had been on my mind that I wanted to write a book. Like that didn't come out of nowhere. And I was just sort of trying to figure out what the right path would be. I'd already like secured an agent, and then it was really kismet, truly. So Donna's email was pretty brief, and I wrote back expressing my interest very much, very ardent interest, and then we just kind of went back and forth, traded some ideas. We had some calls with her boss, and I wrote up. I basically, like I said earlier, took her idea and just ran with it. I put together like a proposed chapter breakdown, complete with chapter titles. If you read the book, then you see that each chapter is kind of like a different lesson. That some of them are kind of paraphrased from things that Stevie has said. Others are a little bit more in my wording, like my interpretation of those lessons. But that's how it started. Like I wrote through a proposed breakdown of what a book like this could look like, complete with research and quotes, because I knew it would be very research heavy and that we would do a real deep dive into just like 50 years worth of interviews and things that she has said and just try to like kind of weave together a timeline from that. And then, yeah, it was kind of off to the races from there. And, I had about 4-ish months, maybe 5 to complete a first draft. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and then from there you got these beautiful illustrations. Got to be so happy with the way it's laid out.
The illustrations are really beautiful. The illustrations are done by this fantastic artist, Niall Grant, who I know that Random House does work with a lot. He's just, yeah, I wish I could even draw. I can't draw anything. I draw stick
Yeah.
figures.
Okay.
And but these illustrations, they kind of have like an anime quality. And they they are like his interpretation, I think, of Stevie's life path. So there's one really beautiful. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I could share some of these too on the screen
Yeah,
for
yeah.
those who are watching on
One
YouTube.
in addition to the cover of the book, which he did, there's the beautiful image of Stevie in a shawl and a bag and boots, kind of walking down Hollywood Boulevard with the lights and the mountains of LA and Hollywood kind of in front of her. And it's like drawn with her, like from sort of like her from the back. And yeah, like in one way, I think the drawings were a way to perhaps get around because it can get very complicated when you're trying to get the rights for photos, as I understand it. And this, I think, kind of circumvented that issue a bit, and I think made it an even more beautiful like piece of artwork.
I agree.
In the mean. In lieu of traditional like Getty images and archive photos and things like that. Yeah.
And they depict her as you describe her, almost as a spiritual guide or a godmother witch. What makes her such a uniquely mythic figure in rock history?
Stevie has been weaving her mysticism and kind of world building about herself, I think, since she started as a singer-songwriter in like in Fritz, the band that she was in with Lindsay before she and Lindsay Buckingham broke off and did Buckingham Nicks. It just in her performance style, like there was always something a bit otherworldly about the way she would move her body and the sort of drapey outfits that she would opt into wearing, and like those have definitely evolved since say like the late 60s, early 70s, but like that's always been there. When she was a child, like I write in the book how her mother didn't love her leaving the house. Her mother was kind of a protective person, not to like a point of problem, not to a problematic point or anything like that. But Stevie, I think, spent a lot of time by herself as a kid and was in place of traditional childhood friendships, which she did have. I think she spent a lot of time kind of like in storybooks and writing, journaling, and reading, and just kind of like imagining worlds for herself. And she, I think, had a very rich internal life. And I think that's part of what started it. And then into her years in Fleetwood Mac, she just, I think, was already like, she's a California girl, I think, at heart. I mean, she grew up in a lot of different towns, but California and its own kind of West Coast woo-woo mysticism, I think, did play a pretty strong role in just her development as a person and an artist. And she was just like into a lot of these like quote unquote witchy things without actually practicing witchcraft. It's a pretty important distinction. But she was into things like crystals and like shawls and shawls draped over lampshades and sort of chintzy decor. And she was just into like the aesthetic and and spiritual ideas and all these kinds of things long before like today they're pretty popular, like all these things like you have um people like millennials and Gen Z and younger kind of talking about their zodiac signs like in their entire personalities, but Stevie was really uh kind of popularizing this like 50 years before it, I think, really blew up in popular culture.
She's the real deal. It's not a character. It's not a made up character. This is who she is. And
No, she's just always been herself. She's not like David Bowie, who would, world build, I think, in a different way and like create, many different characters to embody in his art. And I mean, Stevie has a spectrum, but she's just very much herself and sort of unapologetically so. And that doesn't mean that she hasn't had times of being self-conscious about who she is, but she is still just very much who she is, and that does include writing songs about Welsh witches and describing, kind of weaving like mythical stories and sort of planetary like observations and just sort of like existing a few spiritual planes above maybe your average person.
what's great to see over the last, I guess, decade or so, she got into the Rock Hall as a solo artist. The attendance numbers started to go up, and she started to get this recognition even more so than before. Younger artists look up to her, but like you write in the book, she was once underestimated, misunderstood, dismissed, and mocked. And I'm still trying to figure out why that is. Why do you think so many critics initially failed to recognize her depth as an artist?
Well, I mean, part of it I think is just old-fashioned misogyny.
Right.
In the 60s and 70s, women, I mean, women have always had to fight their way to the front and women of color especially. But and the kind of misogynistic uh takes on women in music have they've changed like because they do still exist, but then I think it was a bit more blatant. So in the 60s and 70s, I mean, Stevie's basically in like a boys club, and to an extent rock has always been that way, but in at this time she's one of many fewer women trying to do this.
You think about how important Stevie and Christine McVie
Hmm.
were to Fleetwood Mac, especially as you get to the late 80s when Lindsey Buckingham exits the band, and they carried that group in terms of hit singles, keeping them in the public eye and writing solid songs.
When I say that she was underappreciated and undervalued and not really taken seriously, I'm thinking mostly of the mid 70s when she enters Fleetwood Mac. And first, when Nick Fleetwood expressed interest in bringing on Lindsey Buckingham into Fleetwood Mac, it wasn't like, hey, like I'd like you and your singing partner Stevie Nicks to join. It was, oh, I want Lindsay.
That's
And
right.
I've read a few different takes as to who actually said, oh, but also Stevie Nicks has to come. But Stevie was sort of seen as more of an adjunct to Lindsey Buckingham's artistry. Like Lindsay was the one who got to, before they joined the Fleetwood Mac, Lindsay was the one who was sort of playing out with other bands. He was the one who was like in the studio writing, and Stevie was who was doing odd jobs like cleaning houses, wait, bussing tables, and so she literally didn't get to like matriculate the way that Lindsey Buckingham did, and so when she went to be a solo artist in the early 80s, there really was this big question mark hanging over the whole idea of her leaving Fleetwood Mac even just for like one or two album cycles. Because one thing I didn't quite realize that like now when I was growing up and now people in singers who start in bands leave to do solo material all the time. It's just it's completely normalized and no one really thinks anything of it. But at this time, apparently it was much riskier, a lot less likely, and just a harder thing to do. And Stevie is not only wanting to go off on her own, but also she wants to launch her own record label, like in order to do it, which she does. But um, Tom Petty, who's all over Belladonna, didn't really like. It seemed like he liked her as a person, but he kind of saw her and Fleetwood Mac as being more like pop radio and maybe a little less serious than Tom and the Heartbreakers, which were like it's funny to call Tom and the Heartbreakers like punk rock, but that was but punk was kind of their philosophy and their
Sure.
mentality. Like
And
they were
that's what they were labeled.
badasses.
Yeah, they were punk rock, new wave type thing
Yeah.
when they first came out.
Yeah,
Sure.
and so Stevie had, and the last thing I'll say is I read a lot of the interviews that Stevie Nicks did and with Fleetwood Mac in the mid 70s, and these if it was a woman writing about her, then she was probably the woman writer was usually a lot more open-minded, I guess you could say, about the artist that she was meeting. But there were a few mid 70s, early 80s, definitely I think more so mid 70s interviews with Stevie where like the male journalist would be looking at this person and just completely writing her off as like you're a featherhead, like what are you talking about with like Rhiannon and crystals and shawls and like all this mystical stuff, like I don't even want to touch this, like you are just unserious. And that was the vibe. And this is not something that I had any idea of. And it was so fascinating to kind of go back in time in a way just by reading these old interviews and like really placing myself back at that point, because I have only ever, known Stevie Nicks as being like the like rock and roll fairy godmother who inspired legions of singer-songwriters. And like I've never heard a bad word about her. Like she's just like so beloved. But there was a time when she was just utterly dismissed as being like frivolous.
Yeah, see that. Well, that answers it then because that is before my time as well. So by the time I'm a fan, late 80s, early 90s, by that point, she's already established herself. But in the beginning, yeah, it was a much different time, which is what that research that you did for this book reveals, which leads to the next question, because you mentioned you spent a lot of time diving into archival interviews, documentaries, lyrics, books. Any surprising discoveries during your research process?
I think that was probably the biggest one, just the extent to which she was written off. Especially with like there were a few Rolling Stone reviews, not so much interviews, but reviews like of Fleetwood Mac's live shows with like in the very beginning in like 1975 when Stevie and Lindsay joined, where they just the reviewer would be watching the show and be just kind of like not really getting what Stevie is doing on stage and not really liking her voice, calling her voice kind of nasal, unappealing, and so that just seeing the critical pushback was interesting because I've never read any such thing just in my lifetime with more current media and writers. So that was probably the biggest one. I think also I really don't think I fully realized the extent to which Stevie felt like she had to separate herself artistically from Lindsay, and how Lindsay was also quite dismissive of her when she went to go do her solo thing. And I don't mean to, crap talk Lindsay Buckingham. I'm a huge Lindsay Buckingham fan too. But reading more closely about their dynamic, in the beginning when they joined Fleetwood Mac, and kind of seeing how, like relearning how the rest of the band kind of saw their dynamic, which they viewed as a bit controlling, meaning that Lindsay is seeming a bit controlling of Stevie, and then just sort of how she slowly kind of gained her self-confidence enough to separate herself from him and be her own planet. as it were. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
she got
was
out from underneath that. And then eventually, as the years go on, as we know, within the last 5 years or so, maybe it's longer time. I can't, time is just a blur. But when Lindsay was out again, it was now Stevie has the leverage. Now it's
yeah.
either, Stevie
Mhm.
was basically like, if he's not out, I'm out of here. And I think, Mick and John McVie maybe say, yeah, we gotta keep Stevie if we gotta
Yeah,
choose,
yeah. I mean,
which is amazing.
yeah,
You trace it back to what you were talking about, how in the beginning she was just, people were dismissive of her. And now here she is. She's like the show. She's the reason a lot of people would pay a ticket to go see Fleetwood Mac.
yeah. And I mean, I count myself among those those people. And this isn't to discount what Lindsay brought to the table because he's a fabulous guitarist, and I love his voice. Like he has a really just a really cool, slightly like more higher pitched like alto. Oh, I'm getting
Amazing
that right. But
guitarist.
yeah, wonderful guitarist. That being said, the sort of mystic quality that Stevie brought to the forefront of Fleetwood Mac in her songs, I think, well, I think you hear more artists even today talking about how they want to emulate what Stevie does as a front woman and as a writer. And you just don't hear that as much in popular culture, unfortunately. And again, it's not to take anything away from Lindsay's contributions, but it's just like it's just kind of is what it is. I mean, Stevie, you cannot predict how audiences are going to react to the people that they love, and yeah. But I have heard that Lindsay and Stevie are talking again, and I mean, obviously they formally released Buckingham Nicks last year on vinyl for the first time, I think, since it was first their one and only album was released in the 70s, and so that they were doing like back and forth stuff on social media to promote the re-release of the album. But I've also read, this is all kind of unverified, but I've read that like Mick Fleetwood is kind of acting as like the mediator to get these guys back in a room together because I think they really want to, Mick really wants to do a 50th anniversary
That
for
would be great.
Rumors
Yeah.
tour.
Because keep in
Yeah.
mind, it is and always will be, always will be Mick's band. Mick Fleetwood. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been his
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
He's been the guy through all the lean times, him and John McVie. But it speaks to the character of Stevie, the courage, the character through all those difficult times. And that's just, I guess, one of the lessons in the book. I mean, the structure of the book is fascinating because it's organized around lessons. So is there one particular lesson that maybe felt the most personal to you?
Oh, that's a really good question. Go fearlessly into the dark, I think is probably a big one for me because, well, I had no reason, I had no logical or compelling reason to try to be a writer, right? Like a music and culture journalist. I had every reason to not pursue that path. And I now kind of think of it as the audacity of youth because when you're that young, like when I was in my early 20s, I was just like, well, this is what I want to do. And I there's nothing else that I want to do, so I might as well just try. And I've had moments where I've been burned out and then had to come back and then was burned out again and then sort of come back to it. But just that forging ahead despite like every every visible obstacle, every, people in my ear telling me that it's unlikely that this will ever happen. And like what are you gonna do? You're gonna like write for Rolling Stone or I don't know. Yeah, so things like that. Like I really I connected with so much about her in ways that I didn't realize that go beyond even just the chapter breakdown, like the way that she is kind of a pragmatist, but also extremely romantic. I mean, that also describes my personality completely. And like there's a chapter called Be a Totally Free Woman that I had a lot of fun writing because I mean I am married and Stevie famously only married once for a very short period of time to her deceased best friend's uh widower. But in general, she never really wanted to be a wife. She never really wanted children, although she has wavered on those things, but she's, very seemingly very happily single and child free. And I enjoyed writing that chapter, but not with any intention of proselytizing that this is how you should also live. That like this, if you're single, you should, or if you're married, you should break up with your partner, or if you have children, ignore them. Like that's not even remotely. I think what I really connected to was just that she knew what she wanted,
Yes.
and she stuck to it, and that's something that I've also tried to really lead with in my life. And it's not to say that I haven't also wavered or had moments of doubt, but I have just tried really hard in my life to just kind of follow my own path wherever it leads, even if it's not what other people do. And yeah, and then finally, I love the chapter Never Stop Being a Romantic, because I am, you could ask my husband, I am like the consummate romantic. I loved watching rom-coms. I still love watching rom-coms if they're good.
Yeah.
If they're smart, if they're like on a Nora Ephron level, then but yeah, I grew up, I think, loving music in part because I was such a romantic, and that like these people writing songs about the ones that they loved, whether they were with them or not. It was like this is their way of getting that, taking it out of those feelings out of their body. And I loved like grand gestures of romance, and still do. And yeah, like I identified really strongly with, and sometimes pursuing a relationship isn't the right idea, but at least if you do. And I think Stevie has spoken very eloquently about like, well, not every romantic decision I ever made was a good idea. In fact, probably most of them weren't good ideas, but at least now I know, and I have a lot of material.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. And another word that really stands out is destiny. Like, was she destined? Are we all destined to do what we're really here to do? And there is the chapter, Believe in Destiny, right? That's, you talk about Stevie feeling called toward music from childhood. Do you personally believe that destiny played a role in her career?
Yes, undoubtedly. I think that, yes, I think we all have destinies, and a younger version of me would never have said that. A younger version of me would have been far more logical, scientific, like, oh, I mean, I concurrently believe that we have free will, and that we might all have destinies and not follow them, or decide to lean into them or listen to them. I think, one idea I kind of tried to weave through the book is just that these ideas sound simple and easy, but actually living them, and by living them, I mean by just living authentically in what ways feel true to you, is actually a lot harder for I think most people, and even people who decide to lean into their destinies, it's hard. It's hard to live. But yeah, I do believe that Stevie knew from a very, very early age is that this was what I was meant to do, and I have to at least try. And like the moment she still experienced really deep feelings of doubt. And what there was one part in the book where I write about her her when she and Lindsey Buckingham were dropped by Polydor Records after their first and only album didn't perform so well. And she thought, this is it. Like, I guess I'm done. And I think her parents said, well, give it 6 more months. And it was like who knows what would have happened if Fleetwood Mac hadn't come calling. But I like to think she would have figured something out. And she's just like I think spending one night at like a party, just on the floor in her room, listening to Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark, like just trying to remember why she got into this in the first place and whether or not she should still push forward.
Rachel Brodsky, the author of the upcoming book, Lessons in Lace, Everything I Know About Dreams, Heartbreak, and Magic I Learned from Stevie Nicks. Stevie said this is one of the things in the book that I never knew. She had problems with her eyesight, apparently. She says she sees the world like in a dream, quote unquote, like in a dream. How much did her physical eyesight or limitations with eyesight actually shape her creative imagination? Because she literally talks about this.
Yeah, that is a really excellent point. And so yeah, she does famously have very poor eyesight. I think also, oh, I'm forgetting what led up to this, but there was a point where Stevie partied so hard after uh just before the Rumors World Tour that she forgot to remove her contact lenses. She forgot to take out her contacts, and the lenses fused to her corneas, and the Fleetwood Mac's tour manager had to bandage her eyes. So she partied so hard and didn't take her contacts out, that yeah, she almost caused worse than permanent damage to her eyesight, and had to walk around with her eyes bandaged for a while, and after Rumors came out. But yeah,
But what did she say about how that shapes her creativity or her creative imagination?
well, I think because she specifically doesn't see like crisp edges, so to speak, it's almost like she is existing in a dreamier world than maybe you or me. And if I was actually thinking about this the other day because I usually wear glasses to work, and I was writing a profile of someone, and I took my glasses off to go do something, and then I sat back down and I started writing again. My vision isn't that bad without my glasses, but I do need them. And taking my glasses off, and I actually just proceeded to write. And suddenly it was like I wasn't thinking anymore so specifically about the words. It was like the blurriness on the page kind of created, I don't know, it helped me almost stand like at an arm's length from the work, and just sort of allow the words to fill up in my mind's eye, and then I would just sort of write them onto the page, if that makes any
That
sense.
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
that's
wear
kind of how,
glasses when they're not on. Same thing.
yeah, and that's kind of how I see, or that's how I envision Stevie's creativity. If you're it's like if you close your eyes and you see patterns and colors behind your eyelids, you could do something with that. Yeah, or if you kind of walk around without your glasses, then you might see something that doesn't it doesn't exist. But you might almost like fall into the metaphysical a little bit. Like, yeah, like there people who are interested in the metaphysical often talk about like different planes of reality, different dimensions. This is getting a little woo-woo, but
No, I'm with you.
if you
Creative
sort
minds get this. I get it.
if you sort of unfocus your eyes literally and figuratively, then it's like you crack open a third eye. Artists talk about the third eye a lot, and I think that by having poor vision, Stevie could had like this almost better access to her third eye.
Yeah, you could see beyond what's actually right there in
Yeah,
front
you
of
can
you.
like sort of see beyond the veil.
Sure. Yeah, you write in the book, quote, even when Stevie was juggling odd jobs, cleaning gigs, and waitressing, she always left room for creativity. Yes, it was exhausting, but carving out that time to write music every night was in the service of something much bigger. Now we're talking about the people who are listening and watching this right now who have a dream of becoming an artist, a singer, a musician, whatever that may be, but obviously you have to pay the bills. What lesson do you hope readers take from this period of Stevie's life, especially people trying to balance the creativity with difficult everyday responsibilities?
First off, I think about this all the time still. Even as a writer who writing exciting things, for lack of a better word, I have to kind of balance that with maybe some like less exciting or sexy writing projects because the bills have to get paid. And I'm personally kind of a realist about where my energy has to go in order to keep eating and keep living, and things are not getting any cheaper. But the main takeaway, I think, I hope for most people is that there is, well, first of all, even if you think you have nothing to creatively offer, just do it anyway, just for yourself. Um, and no one ever has to see it. It's just for you. When I sit down to write anything personally, I don't really worry about anyone reading it or looking at it. It's just I'm just doing it for me. And it's a cathartic activity to express yourself, whether it's writing, drawing, making music. And I think it's also easy to feel like there's just no time in the day. And I think, well, Stevie in her 20s probably had a little more energy to devote to, and also, of course, copious amounts of cocaine, I
Yeah,
guess, even though I don't
yeah.
think she really did it in pre Fleetwood Mac. That being said, the one thing I tried to kind of bring home in this chapter is that even if you just like write a sentence or do one brushstroke or play one chord, that's enough. And it's kind of like saving for a vacation where maybe you take like 5 minutes. It's almost like meditation where you just take like, if you have an app on your phone and you just take 5 minutes to meditate, and then like it kind of adds up over time. And then before you know it, you're sleeping better and feeling more, I don't know, you'd have to maybe ask my mom because she does that. I've tried and failed and I'm a very bad meditator. But I think the point is that just a little bit goes a long way. And if you feel like, because like in the book I write that I've had people say to me in the past, like, well, I wouldn't know it's right. I just sat like, I can't believe you do that. I would sit down and have no idea what to even say. And that's sort of, again, assuming that someone else is going to be reading it, but it's not for them, it's for you. And so it's, no matter what do you choose to do in terms of creativity, if you do something even just for a few minutes each every other day, it always adds up and it is always therapeutic no matter what.
And it's a great takeaway. What you said, it's a great takeaway from the book. And you're going to find those people who are watching and listening right now that are thinking about this. You're probably going to find once you do that, you're going to be looking forward to the next day because you're going to get, oh, you know what? I can make it through this day at work because I know when I get home tonight, I'm going to pick up that guitar and see if I can maybe learn that tune a little bit, or I'm going to pick up paintbrush, or I'm going to pull out that laptop and start just writing a sentence. And it snowballs and it becomes something that you all of a sudden, next thing you know, you got a passion for it. You're just building and learning from it, getting better and better. And I think, that's what Stevie is trying to say as well. Like even during those
Yeah.
times, she would write.
Mhm.
And, probably some of her best stuff came through difficult times too.
Yeah. I mean, she's a famously prolific breakup song writer, and I think, like, I really enjoyed kind of trying to explain her writing process, which would start with just like a kernel of something. If it wasn't, I mean, a lot of her songs have drama behind them, but then others are just a seed of an idea might occur, and then she sort of like will build upon them, and that these ideas can really just strike at any moment. And I think she even says like, I'll go days without writing anything and then spend like the day after that just writing writing something in just a night.
And she's fearless. She embraces change, but she's somewhat complicated in a way, in a great way, because like she said, she had a quote, "I'm not a good terrified person," and she's talking about fearlessly going into the dark. And I thought that quote was fascinating because it's almost like it's a survival mechanism. But what do you think she means when she says, "I'm not a good terrified person"?
One thing I have learned about Stevie, just having read seemingly infinite number of interviews with her, is that she can be a little inconsistent with how she's asserting herself and what she wants and how she feels. There are a number of interviews where she has talked about never having children. There are many interviews where she talked about how she could have, if she could have had a child, she could have married this person. So she can be, I think, a little inconsistent in that sense. And so that's all to say, far be it from me to really say what exactly she means by "I'm not a good terrified person." But I guess if I had to interpret it, I would think of it as like, it's scarier not to do the thing that you're trying to do.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And she also embraces change. And actually, change is deeply embedded in her songwriting.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that she wrote Landslide when she was still in her mid-20s, and I know that when I was a much younger person, I thought that this person singing to me was a much older person. And so, but I think she's also a very old soul, which I try to explain in the book. And I think it's really her old soul quality that kind of makes her write from such a place of wisdom, even when she's still in her 20s. But yeah, I mean, I think Landslide is the perfect example of a song where she is really trying to face down change, whatever that looks like. And I mean, I think she's very human, just like nobody likes or wants or hopes for change. But she, I think, is also kind of a realist and accepts that change is inevitable and tries to kind of process her feelings about um, life's like changing tides and losing people that you love, because she's lost a number of people that she's loved, and losing love itself, and kind of trying to just mold herself into whatever destiny has in store. And that's just how she's dealing with it.
She's talked about Tom Petty and Prince asking them to stand behind her before performances. That's incredibly moving. That reveals how she deals with grief, but in a very positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's so spiritual in the way that she describes the people that she's loved in her life, like Prince and Tom Petty and Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac, and that spirituality, I think, is really like brought to the fore when she's performing live. And she has talked before about feeling Christine's presence on stage with her, and lately she closes out every show with in like Landslide, I think, and running pictures in the background on the screen at the venue of Christine and her and Christine. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, it's not to say that she still isn't sad and doesn't feel the physical pain and the heartbreak of losing people that she has loved in her life. But yeah, like the way that she kind of makes a beauty out of it is really stunning and inspiring.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. You did mention the drugs. I mean, she's talked openly about her battles with drugs, cocaine, later Klonopin, which took away, as she said, her wonderful drama, empathy, and creativity. 47-day detox. That sounds almost unimaginable, but going back to creativity as a means of survival, she said she kept writing during that period, and she eventually emerged from detox saying she had a new lease on life. You see her survival and recovery as one of the most inspiring chapters of her story.
Yeah, I don't think that she knows how to not create. Like, I think it's a coping mechanism for her and a lot of people. But I think she may have felt that she had a lot of time to make up for because she has spoken a lot about losing 8 years to Klonopin, which she said made her sluggish, and it's like it had almost the complete opposite effect on her, because I think that she started doing cocaine. I mean, it was just around, and I don't think culturally people really knew the long-term health effects that doing so much of that particular drug would have. And it was just, but at the time, she had long nights and early mornings, and just also like a lot of just the rock and roll lifestyle, and you need to be like awake for all of that. And I think also she said that cocaine gave her like a sense of confidence, and she can actually be a very shy person. And but then on the other side of the spectrum, it's like Klonopin just like stole her spirit in a way. But she was being prescribed it and told to take it, and then prescribed more of it. It's like we didn't have at the time that there wasn't this understanding that, oh, this is a highly addictive substance and it will create dependency. And yes, you could easily like overdose on this. I mean, today we think about Klonopin and other controlled substance like benzodiazepines as being like you have to proceed with extreme caution, and if you are prescribed them, then you have an appointment with a psychiatrist every month. I mean, it's like very heavily controlled. But at this time, her doctor was just like, here you go, have more. Oh, are you starting to like the effects of it aren't hitting as much? Oh, have some more. Here's a mountain of Klonopin. And it was like just this completely
Well, it's interesting because
yeah.
it's used to treat anxiety and depression, right? It's used to slow the brain down, I believe.
Yeah, it is. They prescribed it to her in the first place so that she wouldn't feel compelled to fall back into a cocaine habit.
Well,
Yeah, which it doesn't make any sense to me coming from where we are in 2026. But at the time, her psychiatrist was like, well, here instead, why don't you take this, and this will prevent you from falling back into old habits, not realizing that they were creating an entirely new habit. And so I think that and Stevie has talked about how coming off of cocaine was like the easiest thing in the world compared to the agony of coming off of detoxing from Klonopin. And yeah, I think also at one point she gave an assistant, like she wanted to see what the effects would be on somebody else taking this amount of Klonopin. And so she gave her usual dose to her assistant, and yeah, the assistant just passed out. And then it was like this wake up call, and reading her descriptions of what it took to break free of Klonopin is horrific and visceral. And yeah, but I also think she was, to kind of come back to the beginning of what I was saying, I think that her writing like she'll write through the best of times, the worst of times, And in this case, also, I think she just felt like she had a lot to kind of catch up on and make up for.
And is solitude creatively necessary for her? Because she describes loving solitude and living a single woman's life. You touched upon that topic of her being single, but I wonder if solitude is something that she needs.
She, to me, seems like someone who is happiest when she is sort of surrounded by sort of like touchstones or like artifacts or um, like just things that bring her joy. So and I identify with this personally because I'm very similar. But I mean, like I said earlier in the interview, like she did grow up with a sort of a rich internal world and seemed to enjoy, and I mean, by circumstantially be spending a lot of time by herself, but also seemed to enjoy being by herself and being creative in that way. And I mean, it's different for everybody. And I don't think there's one way to really be creative. I think maybe just, for her in particular, this being, cultivating a life where she has an environment that is like a room of one's own. Um, Not to get like into my English major, but like to have a room of one's own seems creatively important to her.
The song Ghosts from 1989, that was one that stood out to me because it's not one of her most commercially famous tracks, and she's got so many. But this one's interesting because philosophically, it feels incredibly revealing. If you could talk about that song regarding her comment on guardian angels and why you think it's an important song in understanding Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, well, I mean, Stevie has, I think, always spoken about believing in guardian angels, and I, in the book, tried to kind of look at this through the lens of eternalism, where time isn't happening in a linear sense. It's like the past, present, and future are all happening concurrently, and I think that is probably one mode of thought that Stevie might just find artistically interesting. And I'm not saying she definitely wrote this into Ghosts, but that's kind of where my mind went and how I interpreted the song. And it's funny that, she talks a lot about, spirituality and guardian angels and ghosts and things, in the late 80s, because in she lost her mother in, I think, 2011, and she spoke frequently after that because she was very close with her mother, and she spoke about how she sort of hear her mother's words in her mind when, I don't know, it could be something completely mundane, like it could be a significant moment in the day, or it could be just the most mundane, like don't drink any more of, Coca-Cola, Stevie, or something. But I think that, this kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation where, Stevie has just always a real defining part of her personhood and her artistry is thinking about kind of the other side of the veil, and what might exist beyond what we can see. And this isn't really to talk, this isn't religious because she is certainly not religious. And when she talks about things like guardian angels and ghosts, she's not speaking of like a, Judeo-Christian, biblical anything. I think she's just it's all part of how she's like kind of steeped in mysticism, and that, looking into the past is a way to predict the future.
Well, even she says it's not. Well, here's the quote. We all turn to our guardian angels at some point. I truly believe that guardian angels are out there, and I believe that we've all got one sitting on our shoulder.
Hmm.
Ghosts, for me, at the end becomes somewhat, I don't want to even use the word holy, but there is certainly a spiritual thing about it, and you turn to your guardian angel, and you realize that the ghosts of the past and the present and the future all are a part of you, and you have to dig the past and the future and what you're living day to day. And you have to stop for a second and check out how cool today is and how cool yesterday was, and also hopefully how cool tomorrow's going to be.
I mean, she just said it much better than I ever could. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I think about too. Just as I, get older and probably have lived in California for too long. But I love the perspective of there being potentially a guardian angel, which is it's kind of funny because like I think I start the chapter out just by talking about how much like how prevalent angels were culturally when I was growing up, and um, I don't know. I think Stevie was a bit ahead of her time in singing and speaking so just openly about her sort of spiritual beliefs and what she thinks might exist beyond the veil. And it sounds kind of funny to say because none of this would sound out of pocket for an artist today. Or a contemporary artist speaking about guardian angels and ghosts and maybe something supernatural or something that's like beyond the earthly plane. But I think in the certainly the 70s, but then also the 80s and probably also the early 90s, there was like a lot of culturally a lot of what was it like satanic panic happening
Oh
and
yeah,
yeah. So
sure.
have to sort of applaud Stevie for even just her bravery talking about these things as openly as she did at the time.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookedonrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. If somebody only knows Stevie Nicks from the hits or the image that everybody knows of, the witchy image, what deeper side of her do you hope that readers will discover from the book?
I really hope that readers discover a sort of a yin yang as far as Stevie's personhood goes. I was really struck by how, on one hand, I mentioned this earlier in the interview, but I was super struck just by how, on one hand, how romantic she is and dreamy and just like kind of laid back, let the wind take you where it may, but at the same time, incredibly ambitious, pragmatic, business-minded, realistic. She is just I think the most interesting people and artists are living multiple truths at once. Like they are complex human beings with seemingly uh, contradictory characteristics to themselves. And so I really hope that like Stevie as a complex individual kind of comes through the pages of the book. And um, yeah, like because that's I don't know, I think we could all use some more nuance in in daily life now.
The book is titled Lessons in Lace. Everything I know about dreams, heartbreak, and magic I learned from Stevie Nicks. So the book's not out until September 15th, but people can pre-order. And there's a cool deal through Goodreads, right? Tell us about this.
Yeah, there's currently a giveaway for the book through Goodreads. It started on June 4th and it's running through June 26th.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll put the link in the show notes. Makes it very easy for anybody to access this page. I'm looking at it right now. So yeah, we will put that up and you can pre-order through the usual places. I saw on Amazon, you can pre-order it. Where can people find you online? You got a Facebook page. I think Instagram is
Yeah, I'm not
there's a
super active
great
on my
photo of
Facebook.
you and Mick Fleetwood on Facebook.
Yeah, there's a good photo. Can I tell you something kind of funny about that picture real quick? I met my now husband on Tinder, as you do, and I included that photo in like a slideshow of other photos. This was 2019, and it didn't occur to me that someone maybe looking at these pictures might not know who that is in the picture with me. Because I think somebody on Tinder asked, like, who is that? Like your father, your grandfather? And I was just like, no, it's
Are you
Mick
kidding?
Fleetwood, you doofus. And then I thought, okay, well then, if even if someone doesn't recognize who that is, this is going to be a really good litmus test for who I should date. And luckily, the right one came through. But I'm not really on Facebook that much, admittedly. I'm much more easily found on Instagram at RE and or you just Google my name and it'll come right up. I'm also on Twitter/X at Rachel Brods. I'm on TikTok, although I can be very intermittent about making TikToks. I'm much more of a lurker on TikTok, but yeah, I'm in all of those places.
Rachel Brodsky, thank you so much. I'm a huge Stevie fan, and this is such a great way to celebrate her career by getting lessons from her, because she has lived an amazing life and continues to go out there and deliver, man. She is one of a kind.
I love her too. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
That's it. It's in the books.